So good day everyone. Today we will be discussing about the diabetes mellitus. So what is diabetes mellitus? Diabetes mellitus is an endocrine disorder that happens when your blood sugar is too high. It develops when the pancreas cannot adequately produce insulin to regulate blood glucose level. So in diabetes mellitus, it's a chronic condition that occurs when the body cannot properly regulate blood sugar level. This usually happens because the pancreas does not produce enough insulin or the body cannot effectively use the insulin it produces. So next, we will go to the gestational diabetes mellitus. So in gestational diabetes mellitus, it is a temporary form of diabetes occurring during pregnancy. So in gestational diabetes, it happens when a pregnant woman's body cannot produce enough insulin to meet the increased demand caused by pregnancy. Also, insulin is the hormone that helps control blood sugar. When there is not enough of it, blood sugar levels rise abnormally. So this condition usually develops between the 24th to 28th week of pregnancy, although it often resolves after childbirth. But it increases the mother's risk of developing type 2 diabetes later in her life. So what is the effects of pregnancy on glucose metabolism? So first, during the first half of pregnancy, increasing maternal hormones increases the demand for insulin production to facilitate increased storage of glycogen in maternal tissue. So during early pregnancy, the body produces more maternal hormones which increases the demand for insulin. This is because the body needs to store more glycogen in the mother's tissues to support the growing baby. To do this, more insulin is required to help glucose enter the cells and be stored. Second is during the last half of pregnancy, the HPL causes resistance to the action of maternal insulin, so thereby increasing circulatory glucose for fetal use and increasing the demand on the maternal pancreas to produce insulin. In the later stage of pregnancy, a hormone called human placental lactinogen is released. Human placental lactinogen reduces the effect of insulin in the mother's body called insulin resistance. This leads to higher levels of glucose in the bloodstream, which ensure that the fetus has enough sugar for energy. However, it also means that the mother pancreas must work harder to produce more insulin to keep her blood sugar under control. So third is the fetus produces his own insulin but obtains glucose from mothers across the placenta. The amount of glucose available in the maternal circulation stimulates the fetal pancreas to produce insulin. So the fetus starts to make its own insulin, but it still relies on the mother for glucose, which passes through the placenta. The more glucose that is the mother blood, the more the baby receives. This, in turn, stimulates the fetal pancreas to make more insulin to regulate its own blood sugar levels.
I'll be here to discuss to you the effects of diabetes mellitus on pregnancy and the fetus. So first things first, we have the polyhydramnios. Polyhydramnios. It is a condition where there is too much amniotic fluid around the baby due to an increased fetal urination from high maternal blood sugar, which causes gestational diabetes. It is seen in about 1% of pregnancies. This is when a pregnant person has GDM, their blood glucose levels are higher than its normal. This means the fetus also receives more glucose, which can lead to increased fetal urine production, contributing to an excess fluid in the amniotic sac. In return, increases the risk of complications for both the mother and the baby. Next effect, we have pregnancy-induced hypertension, or what we call gestational hypertension. It means when a pregnant woman with diabetes are more likely to develop PIH, which is high blood pressure during pregnancy that could lead complications like preeclampsia is characterized by the new onset of high blood pressure and often a significant amount of protein in the urine, which we call proteinuria, and also swelling, particularly in the hands and face. Next effect, we have the stillbirth. So what is stillbirth? Stillbirth happens when the fetus has been died before being born. It's what we call stillbirth. It is usually after 36 weeks because of the problems with the placenta or reduced oxygen supply on the fetus. Diabetes, particularly when poorly controlled, associated with an increased risk of stillbirth. So this risk is higher in women with pre-existing diabetes but can also be presenting on women with ungestational diabetes. So why is stillbirth occurring on diabetes mellitus? What is the causes? So we have here, it is caused because of poor glucose control can lead to fetal growth restriction. Fetal growth restriction due to reduced oxygen and nutrient supply. And then we have placental problems and an increased risk of congenital anomalies because a patient, especially pregnancy or a pregnant woman having a diabetes mellitus is a risk for an infection. That's why there are factors for a congenital anomalies, all of which can contribute to stillbirth. So last, we have the neonatal macrosomia. Neonatal macrosomia is when a newborn with an exceptional high birth weight, typically defined as a weight of 4,000 grams or more, regardless of gestational age. Diabetes can cause the baby to grow too large, or macrosomia due to an excess sugar from the mother, which the baby stores it as fat. This could include complications like shoulder dystocia, birth injuries like brachial plexus injuries or fractures, and also respiratory distress, hypoglycemia, which is the most common risk for babies. Patients with diabetes mellitus are increased likelihood of needing a cesarean section. Long-term risks also for a child may include obesity and insulin resistance. And that's all for the effects of diabetes mellitus on pregnancy and also on the fetus.
So next we have assessment. Here we have our risk factors like family history, maternal obesity, previous large for gestational age infants, previous unexplained stillbirth, and PCOS or polycystic ovary syndrome. So what is PCOS? PCOS is an hormonal disorder in women causing irregular period, acne, weight gain, and sometimes cysts in the ovaries. It can also affect fertility and increase health issues. So next we have classic symptoms, the 3Ps: polyuria, polydipsia, and polyphagia. So polyuria is an excessive or abnormally large production or passage of urine. Next is polydipsia. It is an excessive thirst and or excessive drinking. Then lastly, we have polyphagia, feeling of extreme insatiable hunger. Next is we have client may have more frequent UTI and vaginal candidias infection. Next, we have lion. May have more frequent UTI and vaginal candidiasis infections. Next is urine testing for glyceria and ketones as a part of urine routine prenatal care, and diabetic screening around age of gestation.
I'll be discussing the complications of gestational diabetes mellitus, starting with the effects on the mother. As you can see on the slide, one of the most serious complications is preeclampsia, which is a high blood pressure during pregnancy. It can lead to organ damage and may become life-threatening if not managed properly. Next is we have cesarean delivery. Due to the increased size of the baby or other complications, many mothers with gestational diabetes end up requiring a C-section, which has a longer recovery time and a higher risk of infection. Next is there is also a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes later in life. This is because the insulin resistance seen in pregnancy can continue even after delivery. Lastly, we have postpartum hemorrhage or excessive bleeding after delivery, which can be worsened by a larger baby size or urine fatigue. Now, let's proceed on the complications for the baby. First is we have macrosomia, which means the baby is larger than normal. This happens because excess glucose from the mother crosses the placenta, causing the baby produce more insulin and grow bigger than usual. Second is we have neonatal hypoglycemia or low blood sugar in the baby after birth. Since the baby was producing more insulin in the womb, their blood sugar can drop suddenly after birth. Then we have breathing difficulties, especially if the baby is born early or if their lungs are undeveloped. And lastly, babies exposed to high glucose levels in the womb have a higher risk of obesity and type 2 diabetes later in life. Let's now proceed on discussing the priority nursing diagnosis. First, we have risk for fetal injury related to elevated maternal blood glucose levels. This is our top priority because high blood sugar in the mother directly affects the baby. Excess glucose can cross the placenta, which puts the fetus at risk for complications like macrosomia or even birth trauma during delivery. That's why it is important for nurses to closely monitor the mother blood glucose levels and ensure they stay within the target range. Next is we have imbalanced nutrition, more than body requirements related to altered metabolism and dietary habits. In GDM, the mother's insulin doesn't work effectively, so glucose builds up in the blood. Often, this is also related to poor dietary habits. So nurses needed to assess the patient's nutritional intake and work with a dietitian if needed to help her meet her nutritional needs without overfeeding, which could worsen her blood sugar control. Next is we have deficient knowledge regarding gestational diabetes management. Many pregnant women diagnosed with GDM for the first time may feel overwhelmed or confused. They might not understand how to check their blood sugar, what foods to eat, or the importance of insulin if it's prescribed. So our role here is really to educate and empower the mother to help her take control of her health and her baby's health. And lastly, we have risk for ineffective health maintenance related to the management of blood glucose levels. This diagnosis reflects the long-term challenges of managing a condition like GDM. The mother may struggle to follow her care plan consistently, especially if she has limited resources or support. So again, nurses must provide guidance, set realistic goals with the patient, and encourage regular prenatal checkups. In summary, these nursing diagnoses help us prioritize care for patients with gestational diabetes. Our main goals are to protect the baby, stabilize the mother blood sugar, educate her, and support her ongoing health management during and after pregnancy.
Now, let's move on to the nursing care and implementation strategies for patients with gestational diabetes mellitus or GDM. Number 1. Refer to a dietitian for individualized diet management. One of the most important steps in managing GDM is referral to a dietitian. Every pregnant woman with GDM needs an individualized meal plan because nutritional needs vary depending on her weight, activity level, and blood glucose patterns. A dietitian can help plan a balanced diet that supports both maternal health and fetal development. Number 2. Take 3 meals and 3 snacks. It's essential to teach the mother to eat 3 main meals and 3 snacks a day. This regular eating schedule helps maintain stable blood sugar levels throughout the day and prevents both hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia. Number 3. Stress the need for exercise. Metabolize excess glucose. Exercise is also highly recommended. We stress the importance of regular, non-strenuous physical activity. Exercise improves insulin sensitivity and helps the body metabolize excess glucose. Even simple activities like walking or prenatal yoga can make a big difference. Number 4. Stress that insulin requirement changes throughout pregnancy. We also educate the mother that her insulin requirements will change throughout the pregnancy. Early on, her body might still respond to insulin well, but as the pregnancy progresses, placental hormones increase insulin resistance, so close monitoring and adjustment of insulin doses is critical. Number 5. Monitoring the baby's health is another major responsibility. This includes maternal serum alpha-fetoprotein testing between 16 to 18 weeks to screen for birth defects. Next, ultrasounds to check for fetal anomalies, estimate fetal size, and measure amniotic fluid. Next is fetal movement counts to track the baby's activity. From 28 to 32 weeks onward, we perform weekly non-stress tests and NST to monitor fetal heart rate and well-being. Number 6. Amniocentesis for lung maturity. In the later stage of pregnancy, we may also need to assess fetal lung maturity using amniocentesis. This test checks 2 important lung surfactant markers. First is the lecithin or sphingomyelin ratio, which needs to be at least 3:1 to indicate lung maturity. Normally, it's 2:1, but in diabetic pregnancies, a higher ratio is needed. Second is the presence of phosphatidylglycerol or PG, another indicator of lung maturity. Number 7, monitor client for development of complications. We also closely monitor the mother for possible complications like preeclampsia, infections, or preterm labor, which are more common in GDM pregnancies. There are also 2 important things we should always remember when managing patients with GDM. Number 1 is blood glucose returns to normal after delivery of the infant. So, after delivery of the baby, 95% of mother's blood glucose levels return to normal. However, follow-up testing is still important to rule out future type 2 diabetes. Number 2, never administer oral hypoglycemic agents to pregnant mothers. Never give oral hypoglycemic agents like metformin or glibenclamide during pregnancy, as they can cross the placenta and harm the fetus. Insulin is the only safe medication for managing high blood sugar during pregnancy. So, in summary, managing GDM is all about a healthy diet, safe exercise, regular testing, and close monitoring. With proper nursing care, both mother and baby can stay safe and healthy throughout the pregnancy.